will, of course, continue to invest diplomatic effort to ensure that continues.
Keep forward.
Mr. Speaker, we've heard how Putin's henchmen in the Wagner Group are implicated in so many barbaric war crimes in Ukraine, including a brutal assassination of a defector, and how they're sending Russian prisoners to their deaths as cannon fodder, and a massacre in Mali. So do we let this evil continue, or should the UK prescribe the Wagner Group as a terrorist organisation?
Foreign Secretary.
My right honourable friend speaks with a great passion about this, and rightly so. We have seen terrible behaviour by members of the Wagner Group. She will recognise, of course, she's been in my position, that we do not we do not speculate on future prescription, but the actions of the Wagner Group are being watched by this government and other governments around the world.
Chris Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Why did the UK government withdraw at the very last minute on the 10th of December last year from sanctioning the torturous and barbarous members of the Bangladesh Rapid Action Battalion, and then invite them to be trained in the UK in surveillance technology?
Foreign Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, the process by which sanctions are applied is one that needs to be done understandably, discreetly. I'm not able to discuss in details the process by which sanctions are processed, but I will ensure that we get details to him on this issue.
Tim Morton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the southeast corner of Europe, Azerbaijan is waging a human rights abuse again against the people of Armenia. Today has cut off the Lashin corridor, cutting off the Armenian population of Nagorno-Karabakh from Armenia. On top of the continued detention of prisoners of war, their torture and lobbing shells into Armenian sovereign territory. Will the Foreign Secretary haul in the Azerbaijani ambassador, read him the Riot Act, and take a delegation from the All-Party Group for Armenia, which I chair and I declare an interest, to bring a stop to this continued attempt at genocide and ethnic cleansing?
Come on, come on.
My right honourable friend, I know, takes a keen interest in this issue. I spoke with the Azerbaijani ambassador yesterday on a range of issues, and I will reiterate the point that I've always called for, which is de-escalation in that area.
Griffith.
Thank you very much. Yesterday, Reuters reported on a massacre by Nigerian government forces that included at least 10 children who are allegedly unarmed and shot while lying down. The report says that children, some born of rape by jihadist fighters, are being viewed as tainted. Treating children like this is abhorrent. So what actions has the Secretary of State taken to raise these issues with the Nigerian government to ensure accountability for alleged war crimes, even during operations against jihadist armed groups?
Well, the Honourable Lady is quite right to raise this matter. It is a matter of immense concern, and we will be raising all the issues she has set out through our High Commissioner in Abuja.
Dennis Eichner.
Management of the ODA budget has been chaotic, leading to a freeze in so-called non-essential spending. Can the Minister tell us what the impacts have been, and will he publish any impact assessment that has been done?
Minister.
Well, the first thing to say to the honourable gentleman is that the pause has now been lifted, and I know that there is some concern in his constituency about the R&D spend, and I am very pleased to tell him that we expect, in spite of the extremely difficult circumstances of the ODA budget, that there won't be a reduction in that level of spend.
Killie Foy.
The backlog of ATAS certifications mean that many research projects at Durham University are being delayed. Can the Minister tell me what immediate actions are taking place and ensure that any cases my office raised with his department are investigated and responded to immediately?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've received over 49,000 ATAS applications, of which only 824 remain beyond target processing time, but I'm happy to pick up with the Honourable Lady any specific cases she wishes me to look at.
Joanna Chorley.
Speaker, can I ask the Foreign Office what they're going to do about the significant delays in the academic technology approval scheme, which is preventing professors at Edinburgh University and Heriot-Watt University from getting the top PhD candidates?
Minister.
ATAS continues to be an essential tool to prevent sensitive UK technologies from reaching military programmes of concern, and therefore we are proud of the work that our incredible team do to monitor and manage every single case. But I'm very happy to sit down with the Honourable Lady if there are specific cases she wishes to look at.
Wayne David.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday I learned I was to be sanctioned by the Iranian regime for my support for human rights and freedom in Iran. That support, I can assure the House, will continue unabated. But could I ask the Minister specifically what support his government is given to the BBC Persian service?
Or a secretary.
I'm sure the honourable gentleman will wear that sanction designation as a badge of honour, because the point that he has made in standing up for the voice of the Iranian people who are being oppressed by their own regime is an important one. We take the protection of people here in the UK, whether they be British nationals or Iranians, incredibly seriously, and I will of course work with the Home Office to ensure that that protection is meaningful and strong.
Final question, Wendy Chamberlain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know the draconian restrictions that women and girls in Afghanistan are facing, and as the co-chair of the new APPG for Afghan women and girls, we've written to the Foreign Secretary. Look forward to his response, but can he commit to any conversations and negotiations that he has with the Taliban will ensure that that is prioritised, the right of women and girls in Afghanistan?
Or Secretary.
The protection of women and girls remains an absolute foundation stone of Britain's foreign policy. We look upon the images that we're seeing coming out of Afghanistan about the humiliation and abuse that's been meted out against Afghan women, and of course we take our response to that incredibly seriously. And I can assure her this will always be a firm point when we raise things with the Afghanistan government.
We now come to the Prime Minister's statement tackling illegal immigration. Prime Minister.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, before I start, I know the whole House will want to join me in expressing our sympathies to the families of those who lost their children in Solihull. And with your permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a statement on illegal migration. I hope the whole House would agree that there is a complex moral dimension to illegal migration. The balancing of our duty to support people in dire need with the responsibility to have genuine control over our borders understandably provokes strong feelings. And so it is my view that the basis for any solution shouldn't just be what works, but what is right. The simplest moral framing for this issue, one I believe members on all sides of this House believe in, is fairness. Mr. Speaker, it is unfair that people come here illegally. It is unfair on those with a genuine case for asylum when our capacity to help is taken up by people coming through and from countries that are perfectly safe. It is unfair on those who migrate here legally when others come here by cheating the system. And above all, it is unfair on the British people who play by the rules when others come here illegally and benefit from breaking those rules. So people are right to be angry, Mr. Speaker, because they see what I see, which is that this simply isn't fair. It is not cruel or unkind to want to break the stranglehold of criminal gangs who trade in human misery and who exploit our system and laws. Enough is enough. As currently constructed, the global asylum framework has become obsolete. Today, there are 100 million people displaced globally. Hostile states are using migration as a weapon on the very borders of Europe. And as the world becomes more unstable and the effects of climate change make more places uninhabitable, the numbers displaced will only grow. We have a proud history of providing sanctuary to those most in need. Britain helped craft the 1951 Refugee Convention to protect those fleeing persecution. The Right Honourable Member for Maidenhead passed the world's first Modern Slavery Act in 2015. And in the last year, we have opened our hearts and our homes to people from Hong Kong, Afghanistan, and Ukraine. Thousands of families will be setting extra places around the Christmas table this year. No one can doubt our generosity of spirit. But today, far too many of the beneficiaries of that generosity are not those directly fleeing war zones or at risk of persecution, but people crossing the Channel in small boats. Many originate from fundamentally safe countries. All travel through safe countries. Their journeys are not ad hoc, but coordinated by ruthless, organised criminals. And every single journey risks the lives of women, children, and we should be honest, mostly men at sea. Mr. Speaker, this is not what previous generations intended when they drafted our humanitarian laws. Nor is it the purpose of the numerous international treaties to which the UK is a signatory. And unless we act now and decisively, this will only get worse. Already, in just 7 weeks since I became Prime Minister, we have delivered the largest ever small boats deal with France, with significantly more boots on the ground patrolling their beaches. For the first time, UK and French officers are embedded in respective operations in Dover and northern France. We've re-established the Calais Group of northern European nations to disrupt traffickers all along the migration route. And last week, this group set a long-term ambition for a UK EU-wide agreement on migration. Now, of course, this is not a panacea, and we need to go much further. Over the last month, the Home Secretary and I have studied every aspect of this issue in detail, and we can now set out 5 new steps today. First, our policing of the Channel has been too fragmented, with different people doing different things, being pulled in different directions. So we will establish a new, permanent, unified Small Boats Operational Command. This will bring together our military, our civilian capabilities, and the National Crime Agency. It will coordinate our intelligence, interception, processing, and enforcement, and use all available technology, including drones for reconnaissance and surveillance, to pick people up and identify and then prosecute more gang-led boat pilots. We're adding more than 700 new staff and also doubling the funding given to the NCA for tackling organised immigration crime in Europe. Second, these extra resources will free up immigration officers to go back to enforcement, which will in turn allow us to increase raids on illegal working by 50%. And it's frankly absurd that today illegal migrants can get bank accounts which help them live and work here. So we will restart data sharing to stop this. Third, it's unfair and appalling that we are spending £5.5 million every day on using hotels to house asylum seekers. We must end this. So we will shortly bring forward a range of alternative sites such as disused holiday parks, former student halls and surplus military sites. We have already identified locations that could accommodate 10,000 people, are in active discussions to secure these and more.
Does somebody flash the camera then? It's quite serious to take photographs in the chamber. No, there was a different camera. Can I just say, if the member knew they'd taken the photograph, one, I expect them to leave and I expect them to go out to the chamber. It's totally unacceptable when the Prime Minister is speaking to disrupt. Mr. Was it yourself? No. Well, I hope it's deleted and speak to the Sergeant. Can you go out and just have a chat with the Sergeant? Because it didn't look that way to me. Prime Minister, sorry about that.
As I said, these sites will accommodate 10,000 people, and we're in active discussions to secure them and many more. Our aim is to add thousands of places through this type of accommodation in the coming months at half the cost of hotels. At the same time, as we consulted on over the summer, the cheapest and fairest way to solve this problem is for all local authorities to take their fair share of asylum seekers in the private rental sector, and we will work to achieve this as quickly as possible. Fourth, Mr. Speaker, we need to process claims in days or weeks, not months or years. So we will double the number of asylum caseworkers, and we are radically re-engineering the end-to-end process with shorter guidance, fewer interviews, less paperwork, and introducing specialist caseworkers by nationality. We will also remove the gold plating in our modern slavery system, including by reducing the cooling-off period from 45 to 30 days, the legal minimum set out in the ECAT Treaty. As a result of all of these changes, we will triple the productivity of our caseworkers, and we expect to abolish the backlog of initial asylum decisions by the end of next year. Fifth, Mr. Speaker, and most significantly, a third of all those arriving in small boats this year, almost 13,000 people, are Albanian. And yet Albania is a safe, prosperous European country. It is deemed safe for returns by Germany, France, Italy, Sweden. It is an EU accession country, a NATO ally, and a member of the same treaty against trafficking as the United Kingdom. The Prime Minister of Albania has himself said there is no reason why we cannot return Albanian asylum seekers immediately. Last year, Germany, France, Belgium, Sweden, all rejected almost 100% of Albanian asylum claims. Yet our rejection rate is just 45%. That must not continue. So today, I can announce a new agreement with Albania and a new approach. First, we will embed Border Force officers in Tirana Airport for the first time ever, helping to disrupt organised crime and stop people coming here illegally. Second, we will issue new guidance for our caseworkers to make it crystal clear that Albania is a safe country. Third, one of the reasons we struggle to remove people is because they unfairly exploit our modern slavery system. So we will significantly raise the threshold someone has to meet to be considered a modern slave. For the first time, we will actually require a caseworker to have objective evidence of modern slavery rather than just a suspicion. Fourth, we have sought and received formal assurances from Albania confirming they will protect genuine victims and people at risk of re-trafficking, allowing us to detain and return people to Albania with confidence and in line with the ECAT Treaty. As a result of these changes, the vast majority of claims from Albania can simply be declared clearly unfounded, and those individuals can be swiftly returned. And lastly, we will change how we process Albanian illegal migrants with a new dedicated unit expediting cases within weeks, staffed by 400 new specialists. Over the coming months, thousands of Albanians will be returned home, and will keep going with weekly flights until all the Albanians in our backlog have been removed. And in addition to all these new steps, Mr. Speaker, let the House be in no doubt that when legal proceedings conclude on our migration and economic development partnership, we will restart the first flights to Rwanda. So those here illegally who cannot be returned to their home country can build a new life there. But, Mr. Speaker, even with the huge progress we will make with the changes I've announced today, there still remains a fundamental question: how do we solve this problem once and for all? It is not just our asylum system that needs fundamental reform. Our laws need reform too. We must be able to control our borders to ensure that the only people who come here come through safe and legal routes. However well-intended, our legal frameworks are being manipulated by people who exploit our courts to frustrate their removal for months or years on end. Mr. Speaker, I said enough is enough, and I mean it, and that means I am prepared to do what must be done. So early next year, we will introduce new legislation to make unambiguously clear that if you enter the UK illegally, you should not be able to remain here. Instead, you will be detained and swiftly returned either to your home country or to a safe country where your asylum claim will be considered. And you will no longer be able to frustrate removal attempts with late or spurious claims or appeals. And once removed, you should have no right to re-entry, settlement or citizenship. And furthermore, if our reforms in Albania are challenged in the courts, we will also put them on a statutory footing to ensure the UK's treatment of Albanian arrivals is no different to that of Germany or France. The only way to come to the UK for asylum will be through safe and legal routes. And as we get a grip of illegal migration, we will create more of those routes. We will work with the UNHCR to identify those most in need so the UK remains a safe haven for the most vulnerable. And we will introduce an annual quota on numbers set by Parliament in consultation with local authorities to determine our capacity and amendable in the face of humanitarian emergencies. Mr. Speaker, that is the fair way to address this global challenge. Tackling this problem will not be quick. It will not be easy, but it is the right thing to do. Because we cannot persist with a system that was designed for a different era. We have to stop the boats, and this government will do what must be done. Mr. Speaker, we will be tough but fair, and where we lead, others will follow, and I commend this statement to the House.
I now call the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement, and can I join with him in the comments about the tragic loss of life in Solihull, which is unimaginably unbearable for the families, the friends and the whole of the community. Mr. Speaker, channel crossings are a serious problem requiring serious solutions. We need leadership at home and abroad. We need a Home Office that functions effectively, and we need to defeat the criminal gangs operating on the coast. But time and time again, this government has not provided serious solutions. The Prime Minister sat around the Cabinet table the whole time. Where there should have been solutions, we've had unworkable gimmicks. And Mr. Speaker, as I listened to that statement, all of that has been said almost word for word before. The last time we had measures, the last time we had legislation. Plenty of newspaper headlines about wave machines, prison ships, fantasy islands, but no effective action. All designed to mask failure, to distract from a broken asylum system that can't process claims, can't return those with no right to be here, and can't protect our borders. Over 40,000 people have crossed the Channel this year. That's a record. But only 2% have had their asylum claim processed. What happens to the other 98%? They're placed in hotels costing around £7 million a day. Bad for refugees who want to rebuild their lives, bad for taxpayers. And Mr. Speaker, this isn't just a one-off bad year, 2022. It's been bad under the Tories for years. Last year, the percentage of Channel crossing asylum claims processed was just 4%. Let those figures sink in, because that's the root of the problem. Something has to be done to clear the backlog. I welcome the commitment to fast-track clearly unfounded claims. That's what we've been calling for, and Britain is 2 years behind so many of our neighbours and allies who've been fast-tracking for years. So can the Prime Minister confirm, and I want to have an answer on this, that he intends to will clear the backlog by the end of next year, and that's 150,000 cases in the backlog. Well, yeah, I know he said it, and we'll be back when in a year. But 150,000 cases, including the 100,000 that have been there for over 6 months. We need clarity about that. I also welcome more staff for processing. It's appalling they let the backlog get this big. Exactly. Nearly 100,000 cases have been waiting more than 6 months for a decision. That is the root cause. But processing is only part of the answer. Criminal gangs are sending these people to risk their lives. They thrive because of a total failure of any coordinated response or any effective deterrent to their criminal activity. For months, we've been calling for action to tackle this root cause. A specialist cell in the National Crime Agency, to catch, prosecute and disband criminal gangs. We need to be working internationally to end this cross-border crime. Again, new staff are welcome, but can he guarantee that will result in prosecutions for those who put lives and national security at risk? And, Mr. Speaker, money is being wasted on the unworkable, unethical plan to deport people to Rwanda. £140 million wasted already, not a single deportation. And the most senior civil service in the Home Office is the only one in government to tell the truth. It doesn't even work as a deterrent. Exactly. The Prime Minister's promised more legislation. But the last time the government legislated to tackle the broken asylum system, they made it work. They made it work. Mr. Speaker, since the Nationality and Borders Act came into force, crossings and delays have increased. 18,000 cases have been put through the new process, adding an additional 6 months, with only 21 returns. That's slow track, not fast track. How can he have any credibility to say new legislation is going to be the answer? The unworkable gimmicks go on. So do the crossings. We need to bring this to an end. That means a proper plan to crack down on the gangs, quick processing, return agreements, serious solutions to a serious problem, and that is what Labour will offer.
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I mean, that speaks for itself, quite frankly. Mr. Speaker, we're not going to take any lectures from the Labour Party on tackling This is the gentleman who's consistently tried to block steps to strengthen Britain's approach to illegal migration throughout his career. Since he's been elected, he's failed on 36 occasions to vote for stronger laws. And we heard that again today, Mr. Speaker. He talks about processing, he talks about the hotels. The only way to stop that problem is to stop the boats, Mr. Speaker. We are the only party, Mr. Speaker, that has a plan to tackle these issues. A new small boats operational command in the Channel, deals with Albania and France, cheaper accommodation, tougher immigration enforcement, and new legislation making it clear in law for the first time that if you come here illegally, you cannot stay, Mr. Speaker. Labour now have a choice. Show that they're on the side of the British people and back our plans to stop illegal migration. He may want to stand in our way. He may want to block laws. We're going to block the boats.
Theresa May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank my right honourable friend for his reference to my passing of the Modern Slavery Act? Does he agree with me that in dealing with asylum claims, the onus must be on the Home Office to improve its processing? That, contrary to what is said by some commentators and, sadly, some members of this House, people smuggling and human trafficking are distinct and separate crimes and should not be treated or spoken of as one? and that modern slavery is a very real and current threat, with too many people brought to this country into slavery, and that we must do nothing to diminish our world-leading protections for the victims of this terrible, horrific crime.
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, let me, and I know the whole House will want to join me in paying tribute to my right honourable friend for her global leadership on this issue. She's absolutely right. It's incumbent on us to ensure that our processing is swift and effective, but I know she will want to join me in ensuring that our world-leading modern slavery regime actually helps the people who are most in need, who are most vulnerable. They're the people that need our support, and that's what our reforms today will deliver.
Leader of the SNP, Stephen Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I wish to begin by passing my thoughts and indeed those of my colleagues to the families and friends of those impacted by the terrible tragedy in Solihull. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to start by saying something which I think many on the benches behind the Prime Minister wish that they could say. Nobody is illegal, and indeed there is no such thing as an illegal asylum seeker. But what we all agree upon, Mr. Speaker, is that the UK's system is broken, and we can't, of course, escape from the fact who has broken it.
Hear, hear.
But in order to address some of the problems that are faced, I do indeed welcome some of what the Prime Minister has said. I have personally visited hotel accommodation and seen the damaging impact that those long stays have had on people within that accommodation. So to hear positive words in terms of speeding up that process is indeed something which I hope we can all agree on. But I do, however, have grave concerns. Grave concerns about the new proposed legislation, grave concerns about the proposals in respect of accommodation, and grave concerns about the one-size-fits-all approach to asylum seekers emanating from Albania. So in that regard, I would like to ask the Prime Minister a very simple question. Has he consulted with the United Nations High Commissioner on Refugees in respect of these proposals? And if not, why not? But ultimately, the solutions don't lie in either or any of those above proposals. They lie in ensuring that safe and legal routes exist. Now, the Prime Minister made extensive reference to safe and legal routes. So let him rise to his feet and outline one single safe and legal route. Maybe perhaps for a family member of an asylum seeker in Afghanistan, in a way, of course, that the Home Secretary could not just last week. And finally, Mr. Speaker, it would be remiss of all of us in this chamber not to reflect upon the Independent Migration Advisory Committee's report from this morning, which detailed how important migration is to our public sector, to our private sector, and indeed to our economy. So how on earth does this government's hostile approach to migration assist with that proposal? Thank you.
Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to tell the honourable gentleman that the Development Secretary met last weekend with the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. But what I would say, Mr. Speaker, it's a point of difference between us and the parties opposite, is we shouldn't need the permission of someone outside to control our own borders. Mr. Speaker. He asked also about Albania and our approach. I would just gently point out to him that what we are doing is in line with what almost every other European country already does with regard to Albanian migrants. And lastly, he made the, quite frankly, absurd claim that we don't have safe and legal routes into the UK. Mr. Speaker, in the last few years, we have made offers of over 450,000 to welcome people from Afghanistan, from Syria, from Hong Kong, and most recently from Ukraine. And that's because this is a compassionate, tolerant country, Mr. Speaker, and it always will be.
Speaker of the House, Sir Peter Bottomley.
The parliamentary leader of the SNP can put down a debate on legal migration for next week. This subject is illegal immigration. The question in front of the House and the country is how people can be safe, how their status can be determined. Will the action work? Is it necessary? and is it right? I think most people listening to this debate, whether they normally support the SNP or Labour or Conservatives, will say yes, it is necessary, it will work, it should go ahead.
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable Jen for his support. And as he knows, this problem is complicated. It's not easy. It won't be solved overnight. But I believe the plan that we've outlined today represents the most serious step forward in getting a grip of this problem. The task now for us is to deliver on it, but with his support and everyone else's, I'm confident that we can.
Chair of the Armed Affairs Select Committee, Dame Diana Johnson.
Mr Speaker, in our report on small boat crossings published in July of this year, the Home Affairs Select Committee made it very clear that the #1 priority for government should be to clear the asylum backlog. So we are very pleased that that is now starting to be addressed. The backlog of 150,000 has been building, though, since 2013. So the more recent small boat crossings have not broken the asylum system. And we noted how important it was to have sufficiently well-trained, motivated and supported decision makers to make those good quality first decisions. But despite promises to increase decision-making numbers before, targets have been missed, and the attrition rate of staff in 2021 was a staggering 46%. Plus, the technology that they use is creakingly antiquated and reported by the Inspector of Borders and Immigration as hampering productivity. So can the Prime Minister just ensure that he has sufficient members of staff to carry out what he's seeking to do? And can you just explain exactly, when productivity at the moment is 1.3 decisions per decision maker per week, with a pilot that the Home Office have to increase that to 2.7 decisions per decision maker per week, how he is going to triple productivity?
That's right. Good question.
Well, Mr Speaker, can I thank the Chair of the Select Committee, because they're all actually excellent questions and the right questions to focus on. What I can tell her is that we have redesigned the entire process for caseworking on an end-to-end basis, which will take productivity from 1.2, as she says it is today, up to 4. And we will do that in a relatively short period of time. That's how we'll cut the initial asylum backlog by the end of the next year. That process is being rolled out as we speak. She talked about the reason for the backlog. It is worth bearing in mind that the number of small boat crossings has quadrupled in just the last 2 years. That's the scale of the challenge that we are facing, and that is leading to significant strain on the system. She asked about the numbers. We have already doubled the number of caseworkers in the last year to 1,200, and that will be doubling again in the next 9 to 12 months. And lastly, Mr Speaker, I would just say a big part of the reason that our processing is slower than we would like is because time and time again, people exploit our system to make late or spurious claims. And that is why our new legislation will tackle that problem, and I hope it has the support of the party opposite.
Gale.
Mr Speaker, can I first thank my right honourable friend for his statement and for the initiatives he's taken with Mr Macron and with the Prime Minister of Albania as two small but significant steps forward. I also appreciate the fact that he is clearly going to take personal charge of the backlog and ensure that the lamentable performance of the Home Office to date is rectified. But would he agree with me that the only way that this problem is going to be solved will be on a pan-European basis and not domestically? And that if we are going to deal with this, then we have to deal with Schengen, and we have to deal with countries beyond Schengen and reach agreements, and would he use all his efforts to seek to secure that?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for his excellent question and also all his very constructive engagement with me and ministers on resolving this issue. I know he speaks up very well for his local area on these matters, but he's absolutely right, which is why it's so crucial that in the last few weeks we have not only restarted the Calais group of European nations meeting, which the Home Secretary deserves enormous credit for. She's also put that group on a permanent basis, making sure that we now go further, working with Frontex, the European Border Agency, working towards a UK-EU returns agreement for the first ever time. And that is the path forward, Mr Speaker. The best way to solve this problem is upstream, working with our allies in Northern Europe, and the plans and progress that my Honourable Friend the Home Secretary has made are going to deliver exactly that.
Ed Davey.
Our thoughts and prayers are with the families and community in Solihull who have lost their young sons. Mr. Speaker, 97,000 people have been waiting for a decision on their asylum claim for 6 months or more. That's 97,000 people trapped for months in Home Office limbo, banned from working. While the NHS, social care, agriculture and hospitality are all desperately short of staff they need. Last month, Mr. Speaker, it was revealed that even the Home Office's own analysis shows that the right to work does not act as a pull factor for asylum seekers. Yeah. So will the Prime Minister end this absurd ban on work to save taxpayers' money and help grow our economy?
Here, here.
The simple answer is no, Mr. Speaker. We won't do that, nor will we grant blanket amnesties, as has happened in the past, to get the backlog down. We will go through it methodically and properly. But the best way to reduce the pressure on the backlog is to stop the number of people coming here illegally in the first place. And if the honourable gentleman is interested in doing that, he should support our new legislation.
James Daly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I warmly welcome the announcements today? This is exactly what is needed. I can't think of anything more articulate than that. Can I ask my right honourable friend, though, to reiterate the importance of Rwanda and using the Rwanda flight as part of the measures to address illegal immigration? Such an important measure.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. The Rwanda policy is an important part of our approach to tackling this problem, because it must be the case that if you come here illegally, we can return you either to your own safe country or an alternative like Rwanda where your claim can be processed. That's the system we want to move to, Mr. Speaker, and that's what we will deliver.
Mr. Speaker, 83% of small boat asylum claims that have been made in the last 4 years are still waiting a decision. You have an attrition rate of 46% amongst caseworkers. How are you going to achieve your goals?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I set out to the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, we've redesigned the end-to-end process for asylum processing. It will triple the productivity of our caseworkers and will cut through the backlog. But I say the same thing to him, as I said to others. Best way to solve this problem, stop people coming here illegally. The best way to do that is to back on new legislation.
Tim Lawton. Mr. Speaker, I strongly support these measures from the Prime Minister, particularly the disproportionate numbers of Albanian economic migrants who are queue-jumping those genuinely fleeing danger. I heard not a single practical solution from opposition benches, just collective amnesia about what they voted against. The Prime Minister knows I favour safe and legal routes as a counterbalance to having tougher and swifter measures. Will he therefore, in those safe and legal routes we need to develop, have a Dubs 2 scheme specifically aimed at unaccompanied children in peril, and a proper family reunion scheme with those with close links to the United Kingdom legally here, so we can control and welcome those genuinely in need of safety here?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. As our recent actions have shown over the last couple of years, this is an incredibly compassionate and generous country that has and always will offer sanctuary and refuge to those who really need it. We need to do that through safe and legal routes. We want to have that conversation with him and others, whether it's the Red Cross or the UNHCR, about how best to design those routes. But we can only have that conversation and implement those routes once we have proper control of our borders, and that's what we need to deliver first.
Holly Lynch.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has said in his statement, we will remove the gold plating in our modern slavery system. That modern slavery system we could all, across these benches, be incredibly proud of. It protected victims of modern slavery, but it also, crucially, allowed us to secure prosecutions against those abusers. It's currently taken the Home Office 531 days on average to arrive at a conclusive grounds decision for victims, and around 90% of those decisions are positive, confirming that people were indeed victims of modern slavery. This will affect British and foreign children as well as adults, some of those locked in county lines gangs, as well as sexual exploitation. Why is the Prime Minister tearing up the modern slavery system in this way?
Mr. Speaker, that's simply not right. We're very proud of our modern slavery system, and we want to make sure that it protects those genuine victims of modern slavery. And it's absolutely right that they get their cases considered properly. The reason that is not happening at the moment is because the system is being deluged with far more claims than it was ever designed to cope with. When the impact assessment on the modern slavery bill was done, it anticipated 3,500 claims a year. What we are now facing, Mr. Speaker, is 12,500 in just the first 3 quarters of this year. And it's right that we focus our attention on those who most need our help. And in doing so, we can get those people the help they need as quickly as possible.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I live in a place called the real world. And in the real world, people know that the vast majority of people travelling here on small boats are not genuine refugees. Even last week at the Home Affairs Select Committee, the Albanian ambassador admitted that everybody coming from Albania are economic migrants. They're coming here because they can't come through a legal route by getting visas, so they come on small boats. So the public get it, even the Albanian ambassador gets it, we all get it. Prime Minister, when will the opposition get it and realise that the vast majority that are coming over are not genuine asylum seekers?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is a fantastic champion on this issue, and he's absolutely right. We on this side of the House are on the side of the British people. It's as simple as that. The opposition today have put forward no plans, no action, and have not at all complied. And we'll soon see, Mr. Speaker, when we bring forward legislation to stop the boats, they have a choice. Do they want to back our legislation and be on the side of the British people?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Prime Minister for an important suite of proposals that he's outlined this afternoon and indicate that we will constructively engage with his ministers on any legislation that is brought forward. He has rightfully highlighted Syria, Afghanistan, Hong Kong, Ukraine, and the pressures that have been in the Home Office over the last number of years where staff are moved continually from one place to another and then to passports and back again. That's a large part responsible for the backlog. So he is right to double the number of caseworkers. Will the new Albanian team of 400 that he's indicated form part of that doubling, or is that additional staff or staff that will be moved from elsewhere?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, that's part of the doubling, and that unit will be specifically trained to process the Albanian migrants in line with our new system and our new policy guidance, which is shortly to be issued by the Home Office. And in doing that, we are confident that we can start processing Albanian claims in a matter of weeks rather than months. And with our new agreement, we can swiftly send them back to Albania. That's what the Albania Prime Minister thinks should happen. That's what European countries do. And that's what we will do in our country too.
David Davis.
And I strongly welcome the seriousness with which the Prime Minister addresses this issue, particularly his focus on stopping the Albanian gangs. But with respect to the dispersal centres, when the Home Office attempted to introduce a dispersal centre in my constituency, they ignored the local authority concerns about healthcare, public services and children's services. They then also ignored the existing level of Albanian organised crime in Hull, and did not even consult the local police chief before they moved on the matter. Needless to say, they didn't consult any of the local MPs either. If we continue in this mode, the Home Office will face serial judicial review after judicial review, and the policy will not work. So can we please see a radical improvement of decision-making in the Home Office in this process?
Prime Minister.
Well, first of all, can I thank my right honourable friend for his engagement with us and his specific suggestions on tackling the issue of Albanian migrants. I hope he's pleased by what he's heard today, which reflected much of what he suggested. And on the issue of accommodation, look, I agree with him, and all members know this is a tricky issue for us to manage, Mr. Speaker, but we will manage it with sensitivity and care and strong engagement with colleagues and local authorities. I make that commitment to him, and we'll make sure that that is followed up on.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister mentioned that he wanted to work with the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, and also that the Foreign Minister had already met with the High Commissioner for Refugees. Did the High Commissioner support these measures and their efficacy?
Mr. Speaker, as I said earlier, we believe in sovereignty on this side of the House, and when it comes to controlling our borders, we will of course act in line with our legal obligations, but we will do what must be done to fix the unfairness and make sure we stop illegal migration.
Sir Robert Batland.
Mr. Speaker, I commend my right honourable friend for his practical approach to a problem that needs practical solutions. Can I, in urging him to press on with the work to improve the efficiency of the system, including the tribunal appellate system, urge the government to work with the Tribunal Procedures Committee to reactivate the detained fast-track procedure, which has been suspended now for 7 years and which I think could be a reasonable part of the solution to this problem.
Well, my right honourable gentleman friend obviously has expertise in this issue. He's absolutely right about that process and the help it can provide. If you please know, the Immigration Minister and the Attorney General met recently with the authorities, and we'll look forward to taking forward his suggestions.
Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in 17 years as a member of this House, I have never known backlogs in every avenue of Home Office processing to be so great and so slow. And the Prime Minister asked for suggestions. If he really wants to reprocess the Home Office's procedures, he could take out the ridiculous rule that people have to renew their indefinite leave to remain every 30 months, putting the same people back through the system to come out with the same outcome. He could, in one fell swoop, reduce the backlog. Will he do it?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I just gently point out to the honourable lady that the backlog now, difficult as it is half as big as it was under the last Labour government. Unlike then, we will not resort to giving people blanket amnesties, Mr. Speaker, because that's not the right approach.
Simon Fell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I warmly welcome this statement? Tackling the backlog is absolutely key to getting the heat out of this issue and dealing with it fairly and firmly. And I think the same approach on Albania is welcome too. But would my right honourable friend agree that whilst Albania is the issue of the moment, this will move around the globe and actually going upstream and tackling the issue with the criminal gangs who have imported their dangerous business model from the Aegean to the Channel is absolutely crucial. I wonder if you could share his thoughts on that.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and that's why we're doubling the funding for Operation Invigor at the National Crime Agency, which will mean that they can disrupt twice as many organised crime gangs upstream. That is a European effort, and it's proven to be very successful in the past. It will get double the amount of resources to help disrupt the gangs upstream in the first place.
Sir Macklin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A very, very simple question for the Prime Minister. Will he agree with me that any proposed bill or policy that breaches the UN Refugee Convention or the European Convention on Human Rights should be rejected out of hand?
Mr. Speaker, what our legislation will do is ensure that if you come to this country illegally, you will not have the right to stay here. It's a simple proposition, it's a fair proposition, and it's one that is supported by the vast majority of people across our country.
Chris Grayling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I warmly welcome my right honourable friend's statement today. This is a huge step in the right direction. I'm particularly encouraged by what he says about Albania and tighter guidance for those processing decisions. But will he extend that process of tightening guidance to other countries where we have an issue of people arriving, but too often they simply get through the system? I think particularly of a country like Vietnam, which is a fast-growing, prosperous country, where the case to be an asylum seeker is considerably weaker than it was in the past. So will he strengthen guidance for countries like that as well?
Prime Minister.
Yes is a simple answer, Mr. Speaker. The 2002 Immigration Act already has, in Section 92, the ability for the Home Secretary to designate safe countries. Many are already there, and we will continue to add to them as appropriate.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister talks about the views of the British public. I'm pretty sure that the British public also think that you shouldn't punish a child for the decisions of the parents. And it may be an inconvenient truth on this planet, but 1 in 5 of those coming in the small boats are under 18, and it's verified by the Home Office, not those people on Twitter. For 6 weeks now, I've been asking his government for the details of the safeguarding provision. During that time, we have had multiple reports of children who are with their families in these hotels for months on end being sexually assaulted and abused. Nothing nothing that the Prime Minister announced today is going to change that situation in how we treat those children or apply the same rules to these children that we do to other children in temporary accommodation with their families. So will he now at least do the decent thing and make public that safeguarding contract so we can see what provision his government has made to look after these children and commit that families will be housed separately from single people?
Mr. Speaker, the government takes its obligations towards children extremely seriously. Of course, it's right that they are treated differently, and that's why the Immigration Minister has met with the Honourable Lady, and we continue to make sure that safeguarding is followed throughout our processing system.
Sarah Bradley.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend is right to identify that illegal immigration and the associated people smuggling are global problems that need global solutions. So could I press him to use his good office to urge the United Nations to make this a topic for the next General Assembly and to introduce an annual Heads of Government conference that focuses on this issue?
Yes.
Well, first of all, can I pay tribute to my right honourable friend for the work she did in bringing about our Modern Slavery Act. She deserves praise and credit for that. And she's absolutely right. As I mentioned, the global picture on migration has completely changed since most of these treaties were signed. It's right that countries like ourselves update their approach for the modern problem that we face, and I think her idea is a terrific one.
Rosie Duffield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Prime Minister agree with Enver Solomon, the Chief Executive of the Refugee Council, who says in the Times today, instead of seeking to restrict the right to asylum, the government should ensure timely, fair and good quality decisions with access to legal advice so that those who need protection are allowed to stay and those with unfounded claims are returned with dignity. At the same time, there must be more safe routes such as family reunion, an issue that many members across this House have been raising here for several years.
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I agree with all of that, and that's what the reforms we've announced today will deliver. But the best way to do that is to ensure that the pressure on our system is not unsustainably high, and that's why we do need to stop the flow of new illegal migrants coming here, which is why legislation is important as well as our Albania deal. But I want to see the same thing that she does. Swift and effective processing of those who come here through safe and legal routes and the return of those who shouldn't.
Sir William Cash.
Will my right honourable friend accept that the legislation that he's announced is overdue? Secondly, that it needs to be expressly to distinguish between economic and illegal migrants on the one hand and genuine refugees on the other, and that the only way this can be done in law ultimately is through bypassing, by the notwithstanding formula, the European Convention on Human Rights to ensure that we can actually achieve the objectives that he set out, and it needs to be done as soon as possible.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm confident that our legislation will deliver the asylum system that we want to see, and I can also give my honourable friend the assurance that it will be coming very early in the new year. We want to crack on and solve this problem, and I look forward to having his support.
John Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When my mother fled war and famine in Biafra in the 60s with her 3 small children, the cargo plane on which we were travelling, that was the only form of transport available, landed first in Lisbon, which was the only country that recognised Biafra at the time. Does the Prime Minister think that we should have been obliged to remain in that safe, relatively safe country? Or does he agree with my mother that it was better to travel on to Newcastle, where my grandmother was?
Mr. Speaker, this country has and always will have a proud tradition of welcoming people here. And what we need to make sure is that we can do that. And we can't do that if our system is under unsustainable pressure from people who shouldn't be here. So by having proper control of our borders, by ensuring that we create a deterrent effect for those coming here illegally, we will be in a position so that people do not have to travel through other countries to get here, that we can work with the UN, the Red Cross and others to provide sanctuary for them wherever they are, and in the long run, that is the fairest and most sustainable solution to this problem.
Sir Robert Neal. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Can I congratulate the Prime Minister upon targeted and practical measures? And would he agree that what he proposes is entirely consistent with our international obligations, and in particular entirely consistent with our obligations under the European Convention on Human Rights and the European Rights Act? Is it better to concentrate on practical measures rather than the red herring of upending our domestic human rights legislation, which frankly would be a wasteful red herring?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for his support, and he makes a good point. As I've said earlier, the vast majority of European countries already reject almost 100% of claims from asylum seekers from Albania, for example. They are all signatories to the same conventions and treaties we are, so there is no reason why we should not be able to move to exactly the same rejection rate.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
I'd like to express my party's sympathy with the people of Solihull following this week's terrible disaster. But we all know what today's announcement is. It's a sop to the right-wing press. And it continues his party's obsession with scapegoating asylum seekers, fast-tracking applications and weakening modern slavery protections directly undermine Wales's nation of sanctuary policy, which includes an explicit commitment to prevent people seeking sanctuary from becoming victims of modern slavery. So what discussions has he had with Welsh Government to guarantee fast-tracking won't frustrate our ambition to be a proper nation of sanctuary?
Mr. Speaker, we were the first country in the world, thanks to the leadership of my right honourable friend from Maidenhead, to pass the Modern Slavery Act with a dedicated regime which doesn't exist in its form in basically any other European country. We require our businesses to enforce their supply chains. We have life sentences for people who traffic modern slaves. So I'm very proud of our record. That record will continue, but we do need to make sure our system is not abused and exploited, and that's what we will fix with our reforms.
Simon Clark.
Mr. Speaker, and I warmly welcome the package of measures announced today, because this is the key issue on the doorstep in Middlesbrough South and East Cleveland, and it's something voters care about very deeply. The package that's been put together is very, very strong, and of course it complements, as my right honourable friend said, the Rwanda agreement. Can he just confirm, however, that if it is like Rwanda, ultimately frustrated by the European Convention on Human Rights, that we will rule nothing out, including derogation, to make sure that we can deliver this vital package?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, having been on those doorsteps in Middlesbrough South with my our honourable friend, I know he speaks the truth, and he's been right to highlight this issue for his constituents. What I can tell him is we will legislate to put our Albania proposals on a statutory footing. I'm highly confident that those should be delivered, and as I said, they are already in practice in all other European countries. There's no reason why they shouldn't happen here too.
Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister said we will restart data sharing to stop migrants getting bank accounts. Who are we going to be restarting the data sharing with, and why did we stop?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member, I'm sure, will remember, after the Windrush situation, data sharing was stopped in a range of different places and has not restarted. We will be restarting data sharing with the banks, so that when someone tries to open a new bank account, or indeed just on a quarterly basis for existing bank accounts, the banks will have to check against the database of illegal migrants that we hold to ensure that people cannot disappear into the black economy, having arrived here illegally, and then participate in a normal way. That's not right, it's not fair, and I'm glad that he'll be supporting those proposals.
Trevor Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to hear of the new approach to Albanians. That is both obvious and very sensible. But my question to the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, is how we bridge the gap. We have a gap that we approve 76% of all asylum applications, where the EU average is just 14%. We're all ECHR signatories. They are not held out as international pariahs or breaking any abstract of international law. And he may be surprised to hear that I have no issue with the ambit of the ECHR, as long as we have an outcome of about 14% as well. So my question to my right honourable friend is what has been going wrong with our approvals and refusals process?
Prime Minister.
I can say my honourable friend makes an excellent point. He's absolutely right. A big part of that difference is how we're treating Albania. That will be changed as a result of our new guidance and deal. But more broadly, one of the changes we've made today is to increase the threshold that someone has to meet to be considered a modern slave. It was based on simply a suspicion that someone may be. We are changing that to make sure that there is objective evidence that they are. That change will help us close down some of those grant rates, but there's more work to do, and that's what our legislation will deliver.
Fleur Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The white list of countries designated safe is not new, and Albania has been on this list since 2014, so there's nothing new about this announcement. I welcome clearing the backlog. The Prime Minister just said that the new workers would be employed within the next 9 to 12 months, and the whole backlog will be cleared from its current state of 100,000. It was 3,000 when Labour is in power in the next same 12 months. So without the immigration workers there, how will this circle be squared? How will the backlog be cleared?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I just urge the honourable lady to go check her figures. It was certainly a lot higher than that in the last Labour government. But as my honourable friend Thanet made the point, is currently we are only rejecting 45% of Albanian asylum seekers compared to all European countries that are more like 98 to 100%. So the changes we've made today will ensure that our grant rate increases up to the levels that we see elsewhere. That's a result of the new deal that we've negotiated with Albania, which will give more comfort to our caseworkers, combined with the new guidance that's going to be issued, which will mean that we should, as we want to, return the vast majority of Albanian migrants when they come here. They shouldn't be here. Albania is a safe and prosperous country, and they should go back there.
Natalie Alfie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my right honourable friend for his statement and for the new approach on Albania. As much as I welcome the jobs, I'd be grateful if my right honourable friend could confirm that this will be a temporary and not a permanent new small boats operational command centre in Dover and East Kent. And in relation to safe countries and immediate returns, could my right honourable friend update the House on whether a date has been set now for the summit with President Macron next year?
Mr. Speaker, can I just first of all pay tribute to my honourable friend for all the work she does on this issue in her constituency. And she's right. We want to get through these challenges that we face, to have a system where people don't come here illegally. And once we do that, of course, we should be able to withdraw down people and after we've got the backlog cleared as well. And she's also right to highlight the importance of working with the French. That's why our new deal is so important, but there's work to build on that. We're keen to have that summit as early as practically possible, but it's important that it delivers tangible outcomes, and that's what the Home Secretary and I are set about doing.
Joanna Chung.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday I led a delegation of the Joint Committee on Human Rights to meet with the Legal Affairs and Human Rights Committee of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, and one of the issues we discussed was the importance that all Council of Europe states address migration issues in accordance with human rights and international law. And of course, international refugee law does not require asylum seekers to make their claim in the first safe country, and it protects asylum seekers arriving via irregular or unofficial routes, provided they make their presence known to the authorities. So can I ask the Prime Minister this? Can he give me an undertaking that his new laws will comply with the United Kingdom's international law and human rights obligations? And if not, can he tell us from which treaties he intends to derogate? Or is it simply his intention to flout international law? Yes. And if that's the case, what kind of example does he think that sends to other countries in Europe, particularly on its eastern border?
Well, Mr. Speaker, and the Honourable Lady will know this, that both the 1999 Immigration Act, the 2002 Immigration Act, and indeed the Dublin Agreement all actually consider the proposition that it is possible to return people who have come here who shouldn't be here. It allows the possibility to designate safe countries and to do removals. So that principle is well established in international law. What we want to have is a system where if you come here illegally, you will not be able to stay. That is a simple, common sense, fair principle that I think the vast majority of the country is right behind.
John Hayes.
It is rare in this House, Mr. Speaker, to agree with every single sentiment, impulse and word. Unless it's a speech of my own, of course. but I did today, and I congratulate the Prime Minister. His set of measures, his appetite is appropriate and it will be appreciated across the country. Will he, as most of my constituents would, when people travel across safe countries, as they frequently do before they claim asylum, automatically assume that their claim is spurious or at least doubtful?
Mr. Speaker, and this is what our new legislation will deliver. It will make it unambiguously clear that if you come here illegally, you will have no right to stay. You will be removed either back to your own safe country or a safe alternative. I think that is the right system to have. It's the fair system to have, and it means we can concentrate our generosity and compassion on those around the world who most need it, and I know that's the type of system that the honourable gentleman wants to see.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we shouldn't forget why we're actually here with this statement today. It's because the government has lost control of the asylum and immigration system and shown a degree of incompetence which takes some beating. They've also failed 3 years on to meet their manifesto commitments of taking back control of the border, and that their new system would give real control. So can I ask the Prime Minister this? Could he confirm and firm up his earlier statement that he is confident that the whole backlog will be removed by the end of next year of the initial asylum decisions? And could he tell us why he didn't say anything about how long he expects it will take to remove those asylum seekers who have failed in their applications out of the country?
Prime Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, yes, the initial, our plan is to clear the initial asylum backlog by the end of next year. It's about 117,000 currently on published statistics. But he talked about the government and where we are. I think he forgets to mention that if you look at what's happening currently across Europe, the number of asylum claims in France, in Germany, is all up by 50%, and that's because the global migratory patterns have completely and utterly changed. It's why the current system is obsolete, and it's why we need to take steps to adopt to the new regime and ensure we have proper control of our borders. That's what our reforms will deliver.
Damien Green.
Deputy Speaker, I very strongly support the measures the Prime Minister has announced this morning, and in particular his framing of it as a matter of fairness, because I think having tough but fair border controls and an asylum policy is exactly where the British people are. And in communities across the country, would he agree with me that communities, including my own constituents, the measure of success, the visible measure of success, will be when some of the hotels currently being used for housing the asylum seekers can actually be returned to their normal use, and will he make that a priority?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank my right honourable friend both for absolutely championing this issue for his constituents, but also the advice that he has provided the Home Secretary and I, given his experience in how best to tackle the problems that we face. I very much value and appreciate that support. He's absolutely right. I think what people want to see is our hotels going back to what they're used for normally in their communities, but also flights departing, removing people who should not be here. The Home Secretary, the Immigration Minister and I will work tirelessly to deliver that for him and for the country.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister talks about fair, yet what he set out is the very opposite of a fair and efficient system. The best way to stop desperate people dying in small boats and the criminal gangs is for the government to promote more safe and legal routes. Why is the government so incapable of doing that effectively? Why can he find 500 new staff for his Albanian scheme, but only 8 people to process the 11,000 asylum applications from Afghanistan, which means that, contrary to what the Secretary of State suggested in this chamber barely an hour ago, it is the case that there have been 0 Afghans resettled from Afghanistan under the ACRS Pathway 3 since January.
Mr. Speaker, we've in fact settled over 23,000 people from Afghanistan safely in this country. She talks about safe and legal routes. We actually issued in the last year more humanitarian visas than in any other year since the Second World War. That is the strength and depth of our compassion. That's what we will always do. But we can't have that compassion and generosity exploited by people who break the rules. There's nothing fair about that, and it does nothing to help the people that we really need to target, and that's what we will do.
David Simmons.
Madam Deputy Speaker, may I commend the Prime Minister on the approach that he's outlined today and ask him 2 questions. Firstly, are there plans to examine the processes which other European Convention of Human Rights states use, which enable them to be so much more robust in the way that they deal with these issues within the law? And secondly, will he commit to working with those other countries to develop safe and legal routes so together we can ensure that this robust approach applies in the same way as it does in those other countries in the United Kingdom?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend. It's an excellent question, and the answer simply is yes. That is what we have done over the past few weeks, and that's what we will continue to do. And our Albania deal builds on exactly that learning, but where we can learn from other countries about how to do this faster and better with a higher rejection rate, that's exactly what we want to achieve. With his support, I know we can do it.
Alison McGovern.
Speaker, I'm a bit worried because whilst the Prime Minister might be okay with his cheerleaders in here, I think that he's out of touch because the British public do know, Madam Deputy Speaker, who has been in charge for the past 12 years. So as a matter of accountability, can I ask the Prime Minister which of the decisions it is that he would point to whilst he was sat around the cabinet table that means that the backlog is now 14 times as big as it was when Labour left office?
Mr. Speaker, difficult as the backlog is half the size that it was when Labour were in office. So she needs to get her numbers right. As she talks about the British people, I tell you, Madam Deputy Speaker, what the British people want is an asylum system that says when you come here illegally, you cannot stay here. Because that's not right, it's not fair, and if she wants to be on the side of the British people, she should back our new legislation.
Kelly Tolhurst.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I would like to thank my right honourable friend for the measures that he's outlined today, and particularly thank him for his personal determination to find practical solutions to a very real problem. But can I ask my right honourable friend that in my constituency, the Home Office with Clear Springs, their contractor, have identified a disused building in my constituency to use for dispersal accommodation. Whilst I very much welcome the move from hotels to more permanent accommodation, will my right honourable friend make sure that the concerns and worries are listened, that the Home Office listen to the local authority, the police and public health, and make sure that we are deciding on locations that are appropriate and suitable?
I'm really happy to hear from my honourable friend, and this is an issue which she has rightly long championed, and I know she has spoken to the Immigration Minister about her concerns in her local area. I thank her for her constructive attitude in working with us, but she's absolutely right. We will sit and listen to her and her local authority about what's appropriate and deliver sensible solutions.
And Ronnie Cowan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Because the existing system has failed so miserably with asylum seekers in hotels throughout the United Kingdom, I shall once again be meeting with asylum seekers in my constituency prior to Christmas. Prime Minister, decanting them to disused holiday parks, former student halls and surplus military sites does not solve the problem. When can I tell them that they will be allowed to sit down with an official from the Home Office so they can start their legal process of immigration?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Gentleman is right. What will solve the problem is stopping people coming here illegally in the first place. That's how we'll solve the hotel problem. That's what our new legislation will deliver, and I hope that he will support it.
Philip Hollowbone.
Warmly welcome the Prime Minister's action plan to tackle the problem of small boat crossings and thank him for being true to his word in prioritising this issue. The big issue in Kettering is that the Royal Hotel, which is slap bang in the middle of the town, has been designated as an asylum hotel. It's one of the most completely inappropriate settings you could imagine. Will the Prime Minister reassure my constituents in Kettering that the plan he's announced today will be the quickest way to end the use of such hotel accommodation?
I thank my honourable friend, and he's absolutely right to stand up for his constituents, but he's also absolutely right to highlight that our approach is the best way to relieve the pressure on local services, including the use of hotels, so that we can return them back to their everyday use. And the way we will do that fastest is by providing alternative sites that we're working on, but also stopping the flow of small boats, and that's what our plan will deliver.
Alex Cunningham.
Vice Madam Deputy Speaker, we've many thousands of asylum seekers across Tayside. I'm personally very proud of how welcoming our communities can be. But my team in Stockton, they're working with many of these asylum seekers, and they've waited years and years and years for their asylum applications to be processed. And they're waited in despair and fear. All they want is a decision. How many of them can expect one in the next few months?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Home Secretary and I want to see exactly the same thing. That's why with our new plan we will cut the initial asylum backlog by the end of next year. People should get swift processing, but in order to deliver that sustainably we need to reduce the pressure on the system, and that means stopping the flow of new illegal migrants coming here.
Laura Farris.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is absolutely right that there is alignment with our main European counterparts in how we deal with asylum claims from safe countries, and so I congratulate my right honourable friend on the agreement with Albania. Given the automatic return principle that will apply to arrivals from Albania, there will be an incentive to try and conceal their true country of origin on arrival. We already know that that is a problem with the channel crossings, with people dispensing of their ID documents mid-crossing, often at the direction of the people smugglers. So, in anticipation of this issue, can my right honourable friend reassure the House that there will be a sufficiently robust evidential threshold that will prevent people from falsifying their
Prime Minister.
That's an excellent suggestion from my honourable friend, and I thank her for it. I'll also just give her the reassurance that for the first time we will have British officials stationed in Albania, particularly at Tirana Airport, and Albanian officials here in the UK in order to deal with the problem that she identified, and I'm confident that that joint working will help us deliver the solution that we want.
Alison Thewlis.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. His statement today could not be more out of touch with the people that come to my surgeries week in, week out, and I have the highest immigration caseload in Scotland. So can he tell me why Mr H has been waiting now a year past August for his family reunion? He's from Afghanistan. Or Mr A has been waiting to see his family as well. Why these men come to my surgeries in tears because they cannot get reunited with their families. His safe and legal routes, the truth is, are just not working. And for those that don't even have the misfortune to be from Afghanistan, if they're from other countries, there is no legal route. That's why so many people are coming here in boats. That is the truth of the situation. And will he accept that it is unreasonable to make people wait as long as he is, in absolute misery, waiting for a decision that just isn't coming?
Well, Mr Speaker, I don't want people to wait, and that's why we need to stop the flow of illegal migrants coming here, because they put unsustainable pressure on the system and mean that we cannot process for her constituents and others as quickly as we would like to. But with the new plan we've put in place, we will be able to, and once we pass new legislation to stop the flow of small boats, we will, of course, have far less pressure on the system and be able to get people the decisions they need.
Alan Cairns.
I warmly welcome the Prime Minister's statement. It will answer many of the concerns expressed to me by constituents in Barry and across the Vale of Glamorgan. And not only is it the comprehensive nature, but also the detailed approach that my right honourable friend is taking, practical steps in order to resolve this problem. But in spite of the calls opposite, does my right honourable friend recognise that this is a dynamic environment that will constantly evolve and change? And will he remain open-minded to extending the regulations and tightening the regulations where necessary to respond to the ingenuity and innovation shown by some of these people traffickers?
My right honourable friend makes an excellent point, and we need to remain dynamic and nimble to the new challenges we face. I said this won't be an easy problem to fix. It won't be one that we can do overnight, but I am confident that if we apply ourselves in the way that I've set out, we will be able to stop the flow of illegal migrants over time, and I welcome his support in doing that.
Patrick Grady.
Deputy Speaker, how much of what the Prime Minister is announcing today is going to be paid for out of the aid budget?
Mr Speaker, actually, under the DAC OECD rules, the first year of resettlement costs for asylum seekers is actually covered by international agreements on aid. The Chancellor has provided extra funding to deal with some of the pressures that we're seeing as a result of the 150,000 Ukrainians that are here, and we remain one of the largest spenders on international development anywhere in the world, and that's something that we can all be very proud of.
Jack Brereton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I very much welcome what the Prime Minister has announced today. And as he knows, Stoke-on-Trent has taken more than our fair share of asylum seekers and refugees. This has put significant pressure on services, on council services, schools, hospitals, and also on the police. So will my right honourable friend look at what more can be done to put in place the money and the financial support to support those services?
And can I thank my honourable friend? He's absolutely right. Can I pay tribute to his local community and the local council in Stoke for what they do? They do go above and beyond to provide support, but he's right, they deserve our support too. I know the Immigration Minister has recently met with the council and will continue to be engaged with him.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Back in the summer, border checks on the land border between Albania and Kosovo were relaxed, so that there was no need for citizens of either state to register at the border when crossing. According to Instat, more than 2.5 million people entered Kosovo from Albania in 2021. When I was travelling between London and Pristina about 20 years ago, I was stopped and questioned by British border staff. Will the government be embedding UK Border Force staff at Pristina Airport, given that the national and the cultural border between Albania and Kosovo is a porous one?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his suggestion. I'm sure something the Home Secretary will discuss with her counterparts. But his broad point is right. It's right that we have, for the first time now, UK officials in Albania working closely with the Albanian authorities to disrupt the flow of illegal migrants at source. And I'll take his suggestion on board.
Selene Saxby.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank my right honourable friend for his work on this issue, and also take the opportunity to thank the Pickwell Foundation, the volunteers and GPs who are currently looking after those seeking asylum in a hotel badly placed in Ilfracombe. Can my right honourable friend confirm that as he plans to streamline this asylum system, that the single mum and her 8-month-old daughter that on Monday will make a 10-hour round trip to Cardiff to have their biometrics and interview, that items like that will no longer take place as things improve?
Well, can I pay tribute to her local community in Ilfracombe for the support that they're providing? They deserve credit and praise for that. And she's right, we want to have a processing system that is both humane but also swift and effective for people, and that's what our reforms will deliver.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Prime Minister for his statement for what is very clearly a complex and difficult issue, and trying to find the way forward. The Prime Minister has outlined the further steps that can be taken to halt the illegal crossings which are seeing people lose their lives in dreadful winter weather. And that includes working alongside the French Government and port authorities to prevent these trips being commenced. But will the Prime Minister use private companies with expertise, with skills, with high ethical standards? I furnished the Home Secretary with some information in relation to one, those contact details, on who are keen and able to help and assist.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for his contribution. He's right, this is a complex issue. We're happy to look at all different ways that we can make a difference, so I look forward to taking his suggestion on board, and the Home Secretary heard what he said.
Sir Edward Lee.
I was at the Legal Affairs Committee at the Council of Europe, alluded to by the Honourable Lady for Edinburgh South West, and the legal point she makes is entirely right, and it has to be addressed by the government. It's a very serious point. It is possible under present legislation to arrest somebody who lands on our shores and detain them, but under the Nationalities Act actually very few have, because there are not legal routes that these people can take. Now, I'm not in favour of the argument used by the opposition to have more open legal routes, because with 100 million displaced people in the world, it's just a policy that leads nowhere. But we have to address this point. The problem is every time we pass new legislation, it is trumped by human rights lawyers who correctly, under the law, appeal to the Refugee Convention and the Convention of Human Rights and the Human Rights Act. So will my right honourable friend assure me that if this new legislation doesn't work, we will consider a derogation from the Convention on Refugees?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his excellent question. And what our legislation will deliver is a system whereby if somebody comes here illegally, they will not have the right to stay, and we will be able to remove them to their own country or a safe third country. That's the system of migration that I think he wants to see, his constituents want to see, and that this government will deliver.
Dr. Luke Evans.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And may I thank the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary and indeed the senior Home officials who I've had follow-up with about the unacceptable process of allocating a hotel in El Chiltern. I'm grateful for the changes that we've seen. But in his speech, he talked about the unfair and appalling that we are spending 5.5 million a day on this system. It's unfair to those who are housed there, it's unfair to the communities who see people spending this money, and unfair to the taxpayer. He talked to go on and say he's identified 10,000 spaces. Could he say when those will come forward and people will be moved on out of the hotels?
Well, this is something that my right honourable friend, the Immigration Minister, is working on at pace. We're keen to move as quickly as we can and secure value for money for the taxpayer through these commercial negotiations. But we think most of these sites can be brought on at around half the cost of hotels. That represents a significant saving, and we're keen to deliver it as quickly as possible.
I do want to be able to call everybody, but that does require short questions. Dr. Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Living in limbo in a hotel with an uncertain future is extremely stressful, so I do welcome my right honourable friend's plans to get these claims processed as quickly as possible. But processing them is only the first step. He talked of 117,000 claims. Does he have the capacity in the system to ensure that these people, once their claim is successful, are moved into permanent accommodation, and if it's not successful, that they're removed quickly?
My honourable friend's absolutely right. We not only want to process people swiftly, but then have the ability to either integrate them in the community as is required, and we've done brilliantly with some of our other schemes, but then remove them if they're no longer should be here, which is why one of the strands of what we're working on is strengthening and tightening up our returns agreements with countries, because that should be a key part of our diplomacy, and we must have the ability to return people to safe countries, and that's something that we will work on next year as well.
Richard Fuller.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I welcome the Prime Minister's comprehensive statements today, including his willingness to reform assessment processes. But can I ask him about accountability? When we see so many government processes to improve and achieve a policy outcome, the public don't see the outcome achieved, and they're worried that officials and agencies are not held properly to account to achieve those objectives. So what are his thoughts on this matter in achieving the policy outcomes he's outlined today?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm confident because in the Home Secretary and the Immigration Minister, we've got a crack team, and I know that they will work tirelessly with their teams to drive through the reforms that we are announcing today. He's right to hold us account for that. There will be transparent metrics that are published on a quarterly basis already with regard to processing, for example, but people will want to see flights leaving with those being returned to Albania and elsewhere, and people coming out of hotels. That's what we want to deliver next year.
Jane Hunt.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Independent Chief Inspector of the Border Agency found in July 2006 that there was a backlog of between 400,000 and 450,000 cases. On that basis, this announcement is very welcome, and I would like to thank the Prime Minister for taking hold of this issue. Please could I ask when we will see an actual reduction in the number of people in hotels across the country, and what capacity will we have to maintain those who claim asylum and have a valid claim in other facilities rather than hotels across the UK?
Well, I'm keen to deliver, as is the Immigration Minister and Home Secretary, alternative sites as quickly as we can commercially negotiate them and get them up and running. I want to see what she wants to see, which is people moving out of hotels, less pressure on local communities, and that's the type of accommodation we want to deliver.
Richard Graham.
Speaker, I thank the Prime Minister and the Government for their great progress on this immigration action plan, including particularly progress with both the UNHCR and Albania. He will know that the key to this is in delivery, because what we don't want in Gloucester is for the situation to be as it was in May 2010, when my Labour predecessor not only refused to hand over any casework files at all, but we subsequently found over 4,000 asylum cases, some of whom had been waiting for resolution for over 10 years.
Well, my honourable friend, as ever, makes a very powerful point, and I agree with him. We need to deliver now. We've got a plan in place. That's what we'll be focused on next year for his constituents and for the country, and I am confident that we can do it.
David Jones.
Deputy Speaker, could I refer my right honourable friend to the point just made by my right honourable friend, the member for Gainsborough? Can he confirm specifically that the legislation to be introduced next year will deal with the impediments set up by the European Convention on Human Rights?
Yes, Madam Deputy Speaker, our legislation will deliver a system whereby if somebody comes here illegally, they will have no right to stay and they will be removed to their own country or a safe third country alternative. I think that is a system that the British people want to see. That is the system that our legislation will deliver.
Scott Benton.
If you enter this country illegally, you should have no right whatsoever to stay here and should be swiftly deported. It really is as simple as that. May I commend the Prime Minister for his bold statement today and looking to legislate to this end. Does he agree with me that starting flights to Rwanda as soon possible is absolutely integral to delivering this plan?
So my honourable friend put it clearly, succinctly and very well. I completely agree with him and we are keen to restart those flights as soon as we can. We await the next stage of our legal proceedings, but he should be in no doubt that we remain determined to make that policy work.
Marco Longhi.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I thank the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary for their renewed focus on this really key point that matters a lot, not just to my constituents of Dudley North, but across the country. Could I again address the point that the Right Honourable Member for Gainsborough made and perhaps be a bit more specific with the question? If his future legislation is indeed scuppered by an intervention by the judiciary or human rights activists, lawyers, will he have the political will to still force it through and implement what he intends to do?
Yeah, well, Madam Deputy Speaker, first of all, can I thank my honourable friend for all the engagement he's had with me and the Home Secretary on this issue. I know how important it is to his constituents, and hopefully he is pleased by the steps we are taking today. But he's right, we need to go further. That's why our new legislation will make it unequivocally clear that those who come here illegally have no right to stay, and his community should be confident that that's what this government will deliver.
Robin Miller.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank my right honourable friend for his personal attention to this matter, and I welcome his idea for, or ambition for, a fair and effective system rooted in an understanding that the world has changed since the 1950s. But the devil is in the detail, and on a practical point, dozens of hotels have short-term 3-month contracts with the Home Office to deliver emergency accommodation for asylum seekers right across the UK. My concern is, and my residents' concern is this: will he reassure us, please, that these contracts will not simply be renewed quietly and simply rolled over, but will actually be subject to the same level of scrutiny that is promised on new contracts, including consultation with the MP, the Council and local public services?
My honourable friend makes an excellent point, and I will make sure that the Home Office looks at that properly and does look at these things not with a kind of automaticity which he suggested might happen, but reviews them afresh and make sure that they're still fit for purpose, and I think he makes a good point.
Jenkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I thank my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, for his significant engagement in recent weeks on this and other issues. For the benefit of my constituents across Workington, can he set out his expected timescales on A, removal of the threat of unsuitable hotel accommodation in Workington being used, and B, flights leaving the ground to Rwanda?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, what I can tell his constituents and community is that we want to deliver on this as soon as practically possible. Our new deal with Albania will take effect in a matter of weeks, so we will be able to swiftly return people back to Albania, those that are already here and any new arrivals. He knows that we're keen to press on with finding new sites as soon as we can commercially negotiate them to take people out of hotels. And of course, with regard to Rwanda, we are waiting for the latest court judgment, but he should be in no doubt that we want to deliver on that policy.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful to the Prime Minister for making this a top priority and look forward to backing the legislation in the new year. But turning to the legislation we've already got, there are significant powers of detention in the Nationality and Borders Act. And will he look again at how we can implement those, at the very least, for those who are accused of committing heinous crimes, particularly against children?
Yeah, my honourable friend is right. We do have new powers, particularly on the enforcement side. We are very keen to use them to strengthen the deterrent impact, but as he knows, we need to go further, and that's what our new legislation will do.
Ben Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I very warmly welcome my right honourable friend's announcement today. And he's absolutely right. People living in Monument and Weybridge want to see fairness in the system which this announcement will deliver. But can I particularly welcome the new returns agreement to Albania? And does he agree with me that Solving the Gordian knot here is the importance of having multiple return agreements with multiple countries so that when people's applications are processed and found wanting, they can be returned swiftly.
Yeah.
Prime Minister.
My friend is absolutely right. As a matter of priority, we're looking at those countries where we already, in fact, have returns agreements but are not sufficiently able to send people back. We will renew our diplomatic efforts to make that a priority, but also use visa penalties where appropriate to get the outcomes that we need.
Tom Hunt.
Deputy Speaker, I welcome what the Prime Minister announced today and also his personal attention he's devoted to this. My constituents continue to be concerned about the use of the Nove Hotel in Ipswich, which is on a 12-month contract. I thought it was 6. I was told by the Home Office it was, but it was actually turned out to be 12, but that's by the by. I'm very much welcome the move towards cheaper and more basic accommodation. Could the Prime Minister maybe perhaps indicate to me when my constituents may get a sense of a timescale of when the Nove Hotel can be back in proper use?
Well, I share his and his constituents' frustration that their local hotel, as so many others, are being currently used to house illegal migrants. That's wrong. We want to stop it as quickly as we can. The Immigration Minister is working on alternative sites as fast as possible, but also we want to stop the flow of new illegal migrants so there isn't unsustainable pressure on our local services. That's what he wants, his community wants. That's what we will deliver.
James Grundy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Earlier this year, my local paper, the Lee Journal, wrote about the human misery inflicted on the constituency of Lee by a Balkans OCG that was engaging in people trafficking. But we've heard from some in the opposition today that there is, I quote, no such thing as an illegal asylum seeker. Would you agree that that is sadly not the case and we have to face reality if we are to deal with this issue?
Yeah, my honourable friend makes an excellent and very clear point. The issue today is illegal migration. It has significantly increased in the past couple of years. It's putting unsustainable pressure on our local communities and public services. It must end, and our reforms are a significant step forward in delivering that outcome.
Simon Baines.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Having been briefly the Minister for Tackling Illegal Migration this summer, I warmly welcome the Prime Minister's statement. Could he provide more details about how the new Small Boats Operational Command will help to ensure that no small boat can arrive undetected on our shores?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his support of our approach. The new Small Boat Operational Command will bring together our civilian capabilities, our military and the NCA in a more unified way than before, supplement that with new technology, whether it's surveillance, aerial or land-based drones and radar, and in doing all of that we'll be able to maintain an exceptionally high interception rate and increase the level of prosecutions that we're currently seeing, and I know that's something that he will want to see happen.
Jonathan Gunnett.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The people of Stoke-on-Trent, North Kidsgrove and Tork will warmly welcome, albeit cautiously because they want to see delivery on the ground of the Prime Minister's statement. But the mask has slipped, Madam Deputy Speaker, on the Labour Party, where they were absent throughout the majority of the statement in their North Islington coffee bars, drinking chai latte and scoffing down quinoa. But it is up to over 1,900 people have now signed a petition called End Serco's Abuse of Stoke-on-Trent because they're too busy taking up our hotels. In fact, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister's own constituents have signed a petition in this cause. So will the Prime Minister agree with my constituents and his and end Serco using hotels in Stoke-on-Trent?
Can I thank my honourable friend, but also his local community for the way in which they have approached this problem and the support that they give to people who need refuge. But he's right that we can't exploit that generosity, can't exploit that compassion. It's right that we relieve the pressure on hotels. That's what our plan will deliver. But ultimately what we all want to see, and the people in Stoke-on-Trent want to see, is an end to the boats coming, and that's what this government will deliver.
I thank the Prime Minister. Point of order, Alex Cunningham.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. We seem to have been waiting for many years for the tobacco control plan from the government, a plan to reduce and then eradicate smoking in our communities by 2030. Sadly, despite promises from a series of health ministers, we're still waiting. Now we hear of mixed reports of what the government's plans may be on both funding and the proposal to increase the age at which people can buy tobacco products. Now, many thousands of people continue to die from smoking every year, and many more suffer chronic ill health, and we need action now. Have you had any indication from the government that they plan to publish the tobacco control plan and or make a statement, not just on the 2030 target, but also that policy going forward?
Well,
I thank the honourable gentleman for his point of order and for giving me notice of it. I can tell the honourable gentleman that I have had no indication from the government that they intend to make a statement on this subject, but I am very aware that he has a well-occupied Treasury front bench, and I'm sure they will have noted his comments and I'm sure feed his concerns back. Thank you. Presentation of Bill. Tim Farron.
Coal extraction and use bill.
Second reading what day?
24th of March 23.
24th of March 2023. Thank you. We now move on to the 10-minute rule motion.